Hello world, it's me, Dennis, and welcome to Tardan Today. My guest, Dr. Michael Guillen. Hello, doctor.
Hey, Dennis, good to see you, my brother, and I'm looking forward to our conversation very, very much.
We're going to have a good time. You have a new film that's going to be premiering on April the 8th, 2026, called The Invisible Everywhere. And to give our audience an idea of a little bit of what it's going to be, I'm going to have Renee play our trailer. So go for it, Renee. Roll tape.
I used to think it was childish to believe in a God I cannot see. I have a Ph.D. in physics, math, and astronomy from Cornell. I taught physics at Harvard. And I was the Emmy Award-winning Science Editor at ABC News. My motto? Seeing is believing. But then I began asking some deep questions, and the answers rocked my scientific worldview to its core.
I want to see that movie, Dennis.
As do I. But when I think about it, when I think about all the subjects you just talked about, I have no idea exactly where to begin. So I'm going to put that on you. Let's take a look. All right, here are the subjects that you have. Choose something and let's talk about it.
Wow. Okay, well, that's quite a list, but I would say, does God exist? Let's just go for the big one.
Let's go for the big one.
I feel like I'm on Jeopardy, you know. Dennis, I'll go for
ding, ding, ding.
I'll go for does God exist?
That's right. And we're going to find out, just does God exist? All right. Dr. Guillen, off to you.
The reason I picked that, because all those questions are fantastic, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about them and exploring them. But that one, because when I was in the second grade, believe it or not, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
Exactly. Now, what year were you in the second grade? Because I was in the second, let's see, I'm 77, so I was in the second grade, I would say probably about 1950 to about 53.
Yeah, you know, I don't know exactly, but you know, it's in the ballpark.
A long time ago. All right, exactly. In the before times.
Yeah, you know, second grade, picture this. I was born in East Los Angeles, in the middle of the Mexican barrio. I'm Mexican, Cuban, and Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the second grade. And for some reason, Dennis, I just fell madly in love with science. I can't tell you why or how. I think I know now in retrospect after all these many years, but back then I just loved it. Everything about it just fascinated me. And I thought in my small young mind that the best way to live life, if I'm to be a scientist, is to live by the motto, seeing is believing.
Yeah.
That, you know, that's the ultimate skeptic's motto, right?
Sure.
Show me, prove it.
Prove it to me and make it repeatable.
Yeah, exactly, replicable. And so I embarked on this journey called life as a second grader, navigating through life with this motto, seeing is believing. I thought that what we see is all there is. And it wasn't until I was older that I began to realize that that was a very faulty motto. I think it really came home to me, I think in grad school when I was at Cornell. I remember taking an astronomy class, And the professor talked to us about something called a missing mass problem. And
where is it all? How do we cannot account for everything that we see does not add up to.
Exactly. And in fact, the professor said something that just blew me away. It dates back to the 1930s, I believe 1933, an Austrian-American astronomer named Fritz Zwicky. Don't you just love that name, Fritz Zwicky? But Fritz Zwicky was studying what we call galaxy clusters. These are just groupings of galaxies that, kind of spin around like a slow-going merry-go-round. And what he discovered is that they're spinning much faster than they should be. And so he used something called the virial theorem to calculate what kind of mass, what kind of total mass must this galaxy cluster have in order to account for that extra fast spinning. And then he compared that to the actual mass that we can see. And lo and behold, much of the mass, like 90% of it at that time, imagine that, 90% of that is invisible to us. And he called it Dunkel Materie, which is German for dark matter. So now we call this dark matter. And now, so I immediately, when I learned that, I thought, well, I have to ditch the old seeing is believing thing, because if I live by seeing is believing, then I can't believe in 90% of what's out there. And that's ridiculous. So that was the start really of my deep dive. And it ultimately, many, many decades later, led to where I am now.
All right. Let's start with the concept of what we had because one thing became clear to me when I began to study spirituality and religion was, to me, I went, okay, it's obvious that we made God in our image rather than the other way around, because everything that we could, every way I could see God described was very limited. It was very human. It was certainly not, and I love Feynman, Richard Feynman, who was talking with Whom and Woke, and he said, God is too big for the stage. It's not something that we can wrap our mind around. So God being a principle rather than a personality, then I began to be able to enter it in a way of getting there.
It's interesting. First of all, Richard Feynman played a key role in, we don't have time to get into it, maybe some future broadcast, but Richard Feynman played a key role in my becoming a science communicator when I was in high school. I can tell you that story some other time. But, it's interesting because my Jewish friends believe that you shouldn't write the word God, G-O-D. It's G with a hyphen D. And the reason for that is because they feel, and I happen to agree, and it's exactly what you're saying, Dennis, that we can't limit God to a three-letter word. That hyphen represents, that hyphen represents the mystery of God. So how dare we reduce God to a three-letter word? And that concept of yours, I agree. And frankly, everything I've learned in science now validates that God is beyond our imagination, beyond what we can see, beyond what we can prove, beyond what we can even imagine. It's what I call translogical. These are translogical realities. These are realities that you can't prove, you can't see, and you can't even imagine. And God is front and center of that. Yeah. Absolutely.
And one of the things that I'm finding, Doctor, in over the course of my life, is that the universe is user friendly, and that's how I come to the concept of God. If the concept of God is that it's everything, and so that has, it's from the beginning, from the tiniest Planck length all the way up to the large. It's all it is. And so I respond and react to the universe, which in my philosophy, the universe has one answer to every single question. Yes. Oh God, life is so hard and everybody's so mean and I can't get ahead. Yes. I am empowered. I am peaceful. I have an opportunity to be able to have the success and the work that I have. Yes. So it really works on how well I can frame the question.
Yeah, it's I don't know what religion you practice, but as a Christian myself, I believe that as grand and as overpowering as the universe is, and as overwhelming as it is, as you've just so eloquently pointed out, God is even beyond that. God is the creator of that universe, right? I mean, so
Absolutely.
if you can't even wrap your if you can't even wrap your mind around the vastness and the awe and majesty of the universe, can you imagine us presuming to be able to imagine God? And I chuckle. Chuckle is maybe not the right word, but I think you know what I mean. I chuckle when
Of
people say,
course.
well, there can't be a God because if there was a God then, and then they fill in the blank, like, oh, okay, like you know better than God. Because God doesn't make sense to you, he can't possibly exist, right? Well, how arrogant is that attitude? If I can't understand God, then he can't possibly exist. Oh my God. Well, what kind of a God are you looking for?
Exactly.
Right? You're looking for a God who's logical, who fits into your tidy box of what he should and shouldn't be. Good Lord,
Yeah.
get over yourself. Get over yourself.
Exactly.
I've spent my entire life, decades, studying the universe. It blows my mind, the things that we've discovered in science. Never mind religion, never mind Christianity, never mind any of this. Just the universe itself is mind-blowing. And much of that is what I put into my movie. I want people to watch this movie, The Invisible Everywhere, and say to themselves, wow, I've never seen that before. That's why I call it The Invisible Everywhere. I'm introducing the world to the universe people have never seen before. And I want people to say, oh my gosh, I thought I understood the universe. I don't even know the beginnings of this. It blew my mind.
Yeah.
I survived it, but here I am, Dennis. But this is one of the reasons why I love science, is because, and it bothers me that people demonize science, especially, my fellow Christians will oftentimes demonize. They see, how silly is that? How sad that is, because science is what enabled me to just start to appreciate the universe and the creator of the universe. Just start. Yeah. I'm not even, like, from a scale of 0 to 100, I'm at like 5, and I've spent my whole life studying it. Can you imagine? And if you just turn your back on science and everything that science has discovered about the universe, you're probably like in the negative region of the scale, never mind 5. Anyway, I didn't mean to preach, but it's just, you're absolutely right that, here, look, I'll put it like this, Dennis. I call my followers my fellow travelers. And I don't care if you're an atheist or a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Jew or a Muslim or whatever. I don't care. You're my fellow traveler, because the way I picture it is, we're on this journey called life. It's winding, it's up and it's down, like you say, oh, woe is me, or, it's whatever. And we're traveling this road together. We're travelers on the road of life. All around us is mystery. So there's room for disagreement. I get it. I don't get mad at people who disagree with me. That's fine. I'm interested in knowing what they believe and why. But I'm not ashamed of explaining to people what I believe and why, because it's taken me a lifetime to arrive at the belief system that I have right now. It didn't happen overnight. It's been hard earned and hard fought.
Well, this is the distance, because I come from the metaphysical wing of Christianity.
Yeah.
So you have to, that's the place that I come in, and that's the place where I come in as into this world.
Mm-hmm.
And by coming in there, one of the concepts is, and it's in the Bible and many other places, is that God is love.
Yes.
So if I think of that as an equation, is being substituted by equal, then no, well, now wait a minute. If that's true, or since that's true, I've experienced love.
Yeah.
I certainly have experienced love in many forms. I actually feel it. I can experience it. So if I have, then I have experienced God.
Yes.
Then there is that. Then whatever and many of my friends who are atheists have also known love.
Yes.
If they've known love, then it's just the name that we're saying. They're actually knowing the same experience that I'm having, this experience that we label God.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. And, you know, the Bible also says God is light. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the light. You know, it reminds me of a day years ago. We were moving. Maybe it might have been the move we made from Los Angeles to Nashville years ago. And I got to know the young men who were doing the moving for us. And at some point during a break, we got on the subject of God and whether he exists or not and so forth. And I think at least one of the group didn't believe in God. And I listened and I left it alone. That's fine. I'm not out to change anybody's mind. Listen, dealing with myself is a full-time job, Dennis. I can't take on I can't take on the burden of what you believe or don't believe, right? I mean, oh my God.
It's that old Hank Williams thing that if you mind your own business, you'll be busy all the time.
Oh my God. Yes, yes. But anyway, so at the tail end of it all, we were moved in and I was giving them nice tips and thanking them for the move and so forth and so on. And I said, you know, one of you asked me, how do I know that God exists? And I say, I'm looking at you faces. I'm looking at you gentlemen right now. And I see God in you because of what you helped me to do just now. That's the love you're talking about. And boy, there was silence. See, you know, I believe that, you know, Philippians 4:8, one of my favorite Bible verses, talks about how in this fallen world of ours, we're called on to find what's good and trustworthy and honest and beautiful and loving. And I do, maybe call me a Pollyanna, call me whatever you want, an eternal optimist. I do try to see the best in people, even when they're not being at their best.
Right.
I just feel like I'm just maybe searching for God in every instance of my life. And sometimes you have to look a little harder than others because sometimes you do get into, you know, situations that are pretty dark and dreary. But even there, I find God. I remember when my wife and I were, I don't want to get too far into this because it's pretty heavy duty, Dennis, and you may not want to get into it. But I remember when I was still at ABC News and my wife and I had just gotten married and we were trying to have children. And we couldn't. And we got checked out by this top doctor in Boston, because at that time I was also teaching at Harvard. I was doing double duty between Harvard and ABC. And so we went to the top guy in Boston at the fertility clinic there. And he said, well, he says, sit down, I got results for you. And he said, both of you fall into a category we call unexplained infertility. He says about 25% of the cases we see of infertile couples, we just can't find reasons. You know, they checked me out, they checked my wife, Laurel, out. And I said, well, is that good news or bad news? I mean, in a way, I kind of wished that he could have pinpointed a problem that we could have solved, you know. But he says, well, and then he went on and on and on. The reason I'm telling you this is that was the beginning of one of the darkest seasons of my life because I really wanted a family. Being Hispanic, especially, family is very important in our culture. It's important in any culture, but especially in the Hispanic culture. I grew up with a big family, very loud, large, noisy family. And I really was devastated when I'm the last Guillén of my family, male Guillén of my family. So I've always been aware of the fact that if I didn't have a male heir, my name would die out. Sure. Now, some people might say, well, that's awfully vain of you, and maybe it is. I don't know, but it does matter.
Oh, well, we all need a little vanity take along with us, right?
Yeah, and I, you know, I think of my grandfather, my father. They're both wonderful men, and
Your abuelo and all, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't want to be the guy who dropped the ball, you know, just like it. So anyway. But through it all, Dennis, in retrospect, I found God there, even there in that deep, dark year. And I remember so many times Laurel and I would just wake up into this empty, what felt like an empty world without children. And but we ended up adopting this beautiful boy, and oh, he's the love of my life now, and he's doing so well. And if we ever have time to talk, I'll tell you, but let me tell you, God was in the forefront of that happening, that whole adoption. And to this day, I look at my boy's face, and again, just like with the movers, I see God there and his love for me and his mercy, and almost as if God is saying, you see, don't doubt me. I'm here. I've got this. Just trust me. Every time I see my boy, I get that vibe from God, and it's a beautiful thing. Yeah,
wonderful. And that's what you're going to be conveying in this film. That is one of the root of what we're saying, because every opportunity is an opportunity to be able to move. I think of us being on a continuum. 0 being absolute darkness, and 1 being atonement, complete in the Christ consciousness. That, and so I'm somewhere along this continuum, and on this continuum, where here's Dennis, I have the opportunity at any given instant to move incrementally toward the 1, or incrementally toward fear, toward the darkness, toward the 0. And so this is my opportunity. And so meeting you is my opportunity to, because you have such a light centeredness about you, and I get a chance to move with you on the path. You're at you're at this radii, and I'm over here, but we're both moving on the radii that is moving toward the 1.
Yeah.
And so that's going from the binary with the 0 to 1 along the continuum. That's a philosophical way of I'm looking at it.
No, and I actually like your philosophical approach. I want to be careful how I say this, but I wish some of my fellow Christians were a little more philosophical. I think Catholics have a very long history of intellectualism, and all the great authors, Augustine and all the others. And I'm struggling to say to you, I'm an intellectual Christian, I guess is what you might
absolutely
say, right? I don't feel like I have to check my brain at the door in order to be a devout Christian. And I'm afraid that there are many places, sad to say, and I don't mean to stand in judgment. I'm just simply making an observation, because I'm not God, and ultimately maybe I'm wrong. But I just feel like sometimes there are places where you feel like you have to just check your brain at the door. And I think of that Bible verse, Dennis, and this is something that I think about all the time. And in fact, at church on Sunday, we go to a nice little church here. We live in North Texas, just north of Dallas. And we have a wonderful church, not a big one, a small one, humble people, wonderful people. The pastor is fantastic. And he preached on this verse that I'm going to tell you about, and that means so much to me. And it says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your what? Mind. I always found that fascinating. Like the renewal of your mind. The Bible puts so much importance on the renewal of our minds, our brains. And I think that's what happened to me. I was an atheist for most of my life until I got to grad school, and somewhere in the, I say towards the end or whatever, I kind of saw the light. And because my mind was renewed by what I had learned from science. Science is really what brought me to my knees, not the Bible, but science brought me to my knees. And then the Bible kind of filled me in on the rest. And so I just feel like listening to you, and you speak about you have the metaphysical approach, and I get it, but I think you're saying the same thing as I am, which
I
is,
think we're saying
yeah,
exactly the
yeah,
same things.
yeah, very philosophical, very thoughtful, and
Well, I'll use one other term: practical.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
None of
exactly.
this is in theory, because if it doesn't stand the road test, if you can't take it out and actually apply it,
Yeah,
applied Christianity.
yeah, and I'd like to pick up on that point because I think that's a very important thing. Practicality.
That's what I get from you, though, Doctor. That's what I get from you, and what I got in every bit that I've been studying about you, or I've gotten it as far as the film that is coming out on April the 8th, is that everything that you're talking about is practical. You don't sit in the lab. You don't sit in the lab. You get into life.
Exactly. Well, I couldn't have said it better than that, Dennis. It's interesting. You had the philosophers during the Middle Ages who argued about how many angels you could fit on the head of a pin, right? Well, I'm not one of those guys. I am very practical. I'm also just, people say, oh, he's got a PhD in physics, math, and astronomy. And it's like, yeah, that's just a reflection of the effort I put into studying those three subjects. But honestly, if you scratch the surface, I'm just a common sense guy.
Yeah.
And I look for practicality. I don't want you giving me some pie in the sky theoretical thing about Christianity or about God or whatever. No, I just want to know, well, what does it mean to me and how can it make my life better? And, like I go around schools, not so much anymore because I'm too busy for it, but when I was a little bit younger, I would go to high schools and colleges. They would invite me to speak. And one of my favorite topics was the difference between dreams and destiny. And I would tell the kids, as I'm saying to you now, our culture encourages us to dream big. And I think that's fantastic. Dream big by all means. But more importantly than chasing after your big dreams is seeking your God-given destiny. I'm a perfect example of that. I already told you I fell in love with science in the second grade. That was my big dream. And, for a little Mexican kid in the second grade, that's a pretty wild dream. I had never met a scientist in my life, right, Dennis? And but I even have I had dreams, believe it or not, at that age of myself in a white lab coat winning the Nobel Prize. That's how big my dream was. I mean, I was really all in. And, but something happened on the way to my dream. And it was an encounter. Now, I believe this is not a coincidence. This is the practicality of what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
Okay. I am leaving Cornell to go to Harvard. But before I go up to Massachusetts, I do a little detour. I go to Washington, D.C. to the Smithsonian because there is a symposium on 1984. And I wanted to see it. I wanted to hear about it. So I go, and it was hosted by a little fellow with curly white hair named Fred Graham. He was the legal editor for CBS News. I don't know if you remember, but he had a little Southern accent, Fred Graham. Yep. And he was the CBS News's legal correspondent. He was the host.
Yep.
And then afterwards, they had a reception in the rotunda of the Natural Museum History, the American Museum of Natural History, there at the Smithsonian Mall. And, I was just a snot-nosed kid. I was fresh out of grad school.
Yep.
I was an absolute nobody, but I had this big dream of being a scientist. I'm heading to Harvard. Doesn't get better than that, right? And I noticed that he's like standing alone with this beautiful woman. And my first thought was, wow, this is a famous guy on TV, and nobody's like talking to him. He's just like standing there like a stiff with this beautiful woman. So I've never been shy, Dennis. So I decided, well, you know what? I'm just going to go and introduce myself to him. I said, Mr. Graham, I'm Michael Guillén. I just want to let you know I enjoyed the symposium. I watch you on TV. I think you're terrific. And that's all I wanted to say. I had no agenda, nothing. And he says, oh, yeah. Oh, he says, well, thank you. He says, well, what do you do? I said, well, I told him I just finished grad school. I'm on my way to Harvard to teach physics and blah, blah, blah. He says, oh, you're a scientist. He lit up. He says, oh, you're a scientist. He says, well, maybe you can settle an argument that I'm having with my producer here. And I'm thinking, oh, Lord Almighty, I've just stepped into something in the middle. The last thing I want to be is in the middle of an argument, right? So he says, well, the argument is that you see that big pendulum that's hanging from the roof of the museum, the ceiling of the museum? I said, yeah, it's called the Foucault pendulum. I said, what about it? He said, well, she thinks that once you push that thing, you don't have to push it anymore. It'll just keep going back and forth forever. I think you need to push it every now and again to keep it going. So my little brains are rattling. I'm trying to be the diplomat, right? So I'm like, well, you're kind of both right. I was hedging. I always try to be polite. And so I said to him, the fact is, there's not a whole lot of friction to the system. The only friction you have is where the cable meets the ceiling. I said, you do have a little friction there, but which means that you don't have to push it that often. But yeah, you do every now and again. Whatever I said, Dennis, to this day, I wish somebody had been running a video recorder, because whatever I said and however I said it, the guy just blew up. He said, that was the most fantastic explanation I've ever heard. He says, have you ever thought about being on television? Just like that. Just like that. I said, well, no, sir. He says, Jonathan Katz, the executive producer of CBS Morning News, is looking for a science and technology guy. He said, would you mind if I put your name in the ring? I'm like, what just happened? What just happened? I said, well, yeah, of course. And long story short, they hired me. That was my start in TV. So
there you go.
I am chasing my dreams, right? Chasing my dream. But my destiny was to do what I'm doing with you right now. Now here I am. I've made a movie. I'm talking to you about it. I would not have done that if I had just stuck to my dream of being a scientist. I'd still be holed up in some lab in the basement of some building somewhere.
We would, and none of us would be able to experience the movie that's coming out on April 8th, The Invisible Everywhere, and all of us will get a chance, assuming that you're going to allow it, to come back again and further our conversations.
I would be honored, Dennis. Thank you so much. I really feel like I'm talking to a kindred spirit. It's been a blessing for me. I hope it's been a blessing to your viewers. Yes, my answer is yes. Invite me back. Let's continue and pick it up where we left off. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Guillén. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Remember, April the 8th, The Invisible Everywhere. The link will be on the console. And we'll see everybody on Tardan Today next time.